I'll be your moderator on this webinar today, and my team member, Lakeisha Ward, and I will handle all the questions that you type into the questions box. We are pleased to partner with Ila Gandhi and Andrew Turksak in this webinar. Ila is our Senior Consultant at Berlitz TMC, and Andrew manages our online solutions development. And they will guide us through how the Cultural Navigator can be used as a value add to managing diverse teams. Just a few housekeeping items that we'd like to go over with you before we start. First, in order to reduce background noise during the presentation, all participants will be muted throughout today's webinar. Second, we invite you to use the interactive nature of this interface, so at any time you can type a question into the questions box. We will reserve about 30 minutes at the end for a moderated question and answer session. Third, we'll be recording today's session, and after the webinar, we will share the link with you by email to the email ID you used at registration. And finally, we're letting you know up front that when we switch presenters, you may see a pause in the presentation. So please bear with us. All right, we appreciate that you're here with us today. So let's get started. We'd like to understand who's on the line with us today. So please let us know what your organizational role is by choosing from the following options: talent management, organizational development, training, business line leader, or other. And if you choose the other option, go ahead and type into the chat box or the question box what your role is. Okay, and let's give it another 2 seconds, Lakeisha, and close it up. And it looks like we have mostly training department employees on the line with us today, and quite a few others. So we'll dig into that as we go. But we do have both organizational development and talent management on the line with us today as well. So welcome, everyone. And now I'd like to hand it over to Ila Gandhi. Ila?
Thank you, Lynn. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly, Ila.
Thank you. And welcome to our webinar titled Managing Diverse Teams. As you know, my name is Ila, and I am delighted to explore this topic with you today. Teamwork and work teams are a crucial part of any business or organization, as major tasks, projects, and deliverables are accomplished by groups of employees. Teams play a pivotal role in helping organizations exceed revenue targets and accomplish corporate goals. The global economy has redefined traditional team models to incorporate the dynamics of working with diverse employees both in the local and global marketplace. These models are designed to leverage and include the diverse backgrounds, values, and perspectives of the emerging workforce. We will spend the next 20 to 30 minutes exploring these models and discuss ways to leverage the Cultural Navigator to succeed in a multicultural, diverse, and global work environment. Let's begin the session with a polling question. In this polling question, we ask you to complete the following statement. Diversity and inclusion in my organization is, and the choices, integrated into my organization's overall business strategy, managed on an ad hoc basis by human resources, robust in some functions and less in others, not completely defined at this time, or other. So take a few seconds to respond to this polling question. And should we close the poll now, Lakeisha? Are we ready? Thank you for your candid responses. It looks like most organizations have a diversity and inclusion strategy established, and some are a little further along than others. Before we begin to understand how to manage diverse teams, it is important to spend a few minutes understanding the concept of global diversity. Diversity as we know it has changed over the last decade and is continuously evolving as the world economy grows, with new players entering the market and long-time players taking on a secondary role. There are many definitions for diversity, and most definitions focus on visible and invisible similarities and differences. Traditional diversity began in the United States, was driven by U.S. leaders, was narrowly defined by race, gender, and age, and enforced by affirmative action and compliance laws. Today, best practices around global diversity include a top-down belief that diversity drives innovation and creativity, is embraced by leaders in every location, encourages keen inclusion, respect, and engagement practices, and is an integral part of the organization. Team diversity includes the unique individuality that each team member brings to the table. For the longest time, this uniqueness was easy to manage since employees had similar work-life experiences and common goals. There is no question that in today's work environment, life is no longer that simple, and teams are often distributed in sites around the globe, coming from many different backgrounds, cultures, and perspectives. This makes collaboration difficult, especially due to real and imaginary boundaries. A leader must address and acknowledge these boundaries so that teams can surface the issues, overcome them, and develop strategies to move forward. Then only can they commit to the hard and uncomfortable work that lies ahead. TNC has defined these boundaries as our frames of reference, the lens through which we view the world. On the next slide, we will look at frames of references as they relate to teamwork. So how do boundaries or frames of reference impact diverse teams? Recently, I had an opportunity to observe two different teams from the same organization participating in the same TNC workshop halfway across the world from each other. I was amazed at the dynamics of the two different groups. Both teams were engaging, passionate, and totally committed to the organization. However, as we progressed through the day, slowly but surely, local values, cultural preferences, nationality, tenure and position in the organization, and ethnic identities came into play, and the learning outcomes for the two sessions were driven by these visible and invisible cues. But what was really gratifying to me is when you have a common, non-judgmental, neutral, and safe vocabulary, it does not matter where you are in the world. People are drawn to finding ways to engage and collaborate with the diverse perspectives that are in the room. This open attitude and self-awareness begins the journey to cultural competence and is the first step towards becoming high-performing diverse work teams. Let's spend a few minutes understanding the model that provides you with the framework and neutral vocabulary for effective interactions. The cultural orientation model is a validated cultural framework developed in the mid-80s to synthesize and organize the main dimensions of cultural differences that are recognized in the intercultural field. The goal of the tool is to enable practical application, awareness, and skill development in a variety of work-related contexts. The Cultural Orientation Indicator, or the self-assessment tool, relates to the construct of culture in the same way as the Myers-Briggs relates to the construct of personality. Two sets of comparison tools, different countries and team comparisons, are available to understand the impact of cultural differences to our work-related interactions and team dynamics. The Cultural Orientation Indicator Assessment and Personal Report is currently available in 11 languages. Let me go ahead and review a couple of common definitions in the cultural orientations model. A dimension is an overall category that contains several continua. A cultural continuum is the spectrum between two opposing orientations within a cultural dimension. An orientation or preference is a particular culture-based value such as equality, private, or systemic. There are three dimensions in the cultural orientations model, and they are the interaction style dimension, how we interact with each other in the work environment; the thinking style dimension, how we think, conceptualize, and process information; and the sense of self dimension, how we view ourselves and are motivated at work. So let's take a look at an example. There are 6 continua in the interaction style dimension. One of the continua reflects a fixed or fluid preference for time, or in other words, how we prefer to use time. A fixed orientation defines and manages time precisely, and a fluid orientation views time as a loose and abundant resource. The U.S. generally has a fixed preference for time, and Brazil generally a fluid preference. The Cultural Navigator provides practical application to help both the U.S. and Brazilian teams learn how to be effective when working together with these two opposing preferences. I'm going to turn it over to Andrew now so that he can demonstrate the practical application we have discussed thus far. Andrew?
Thank you, Ila, and thank you again, everyone, for joining us today on this webinar. First, I'd just like to share with you some of the benefits that you can gain from the Cultural Navigator with a focus specifically on managing your diverse teams. So one of the first areas that you will encounter once you enter the Cultural Navigator for the first time, or as you set up your accounts, would be on customizing your personal experience. The area you see here on the upper left-hand side allows you to define those areas of interest that map up with your own personal business objectives or goals for learning on the Cultural Navigator. So here you can see I've selected one of our available interest topics called Managing a Diverse Team. And once I open up that selection, I can receive a filtered view of recommended learning initiatives that are available to me on the Cultural Navigator that help me to understand how to manage diversity, how to set goals, and also follow up with my fellow team members. So I can access a diverse amount of activities, learning paths, and other experiences that are available on the Cultural Navigator within a filtered viewpoint directly from my personal homepage. But as Ila mentioned earlier, one of the first areas that we encourage our users to explore on the Cultural Navigator is in that of the Cultural Orientations Indicator, being able to define your own personal cultural preferences at work. So one of the recommended learning paths that you would encounter as you entered into your account or as you return to your account for the first time would be to complete the Building Self-Awareness learning path, which you see here. Once you enter the learning path, you would be able to review a series of steps that guide you through the process of taking your own Cultural Orientations Indicator assessment. You can understand a bit of an overview of this particular experience, see where you are in your progress, and then scroll through the available steps that are available within this particular learning path, as well as see a completion time estimate on the bottom of each page, as well as within each step. So here you would be taken through the 3 dimensions that Ila had touched on earlier, measuring your interaction style, thinking style, and sense of self. But once you complete any of the 3 dimensions, you would be able to access your own personal report for that dimension. So here you see our report for interaction style, which measures how I tend to communicate or prefer to tend to communicate and engage with my associates in the workplace. At the top of my reports, I receive a summary of my personal results, so I can understand a bit about what it means to be being oriented, for example, that I tend to focus more on building relationships before going down to task level. And then I can select the item here or simply scroll down in my report to access a full debrief understanding of my personal orientation. So within each of the cultural preferences, I have access to a detailed debrief, information on challenges that I may encounter within the workplace, scenarios, and also existing resources that are available on the Cultural Navigator that I can utilize to help me understand my personal preference better. I also have an audio debrief component located on the left-hand side here, which I can use to really begin to further understand the impact of my orientation and how it may impact my relationships with business colleagues within my own work environment. As I go to the top of the page here, I can quickly scroll through each dimension that I have completed within the Cultural Navigator, so I can see my thinking style preferences as well as those within the sense of self dimension. And then as I go to the sidebar on this right-hand side here, you can pull up a high-level summary of your own personal COI reports that is organized across the 3 dimensions of culture. So here you can see a quick snapshot of all of your preferences as well as those that you have strong or very strong orientations within, as noted by the asterisks that I've seen here. So by completing your cultural orientations indicator and customizing your cultural navigator, you'll be better prepared to take advantage of some of the offerings available to you to help manage your diverse teams. But this was only a brief overview of some of the features that are available to you after you complete the COI assessment. But now I'd like to pass the discussion back over to Ila, who will share more information on how you can apply the learning here to your diverse team.
Thank you, Andrew, and welcome back. Let's continue this discussion with another polling question. I'd like to ask you, what are some of the resources available in your organization to manage diverse teams? Please choose from the options highlighted on the slide. The Cultural Navigator, training programs and resources developed internally, consultants, internal and external change agents, or there are no internal programs and employees learn through experience, or other. If you choose the option other, please type your role in the Q&A box. Take a few seconds for the quick poll. And Lakeisha, how we're doing? Let's close the poll. I am so glad to see that almost all organizations have provided some type of resources for employees to learn how to be more effective in diverse teams. Let me now demonstrate how you can leverage the Cultural Navigator to develop high-performing diverse teams through a personal case study. This is my personal story and a case study regarding a diverse work team. In my last corporate role, I was the international HR leader for a large global organization. I worked with 6 regional HR leaders and 1 support team member, and together we provided HR support to 10,000 employees based in 53 countries around the world. Our team was represented by 3 men and 5 women between the ages of 31 and 62. Most of us were tenured employees with the minimum time in the organization at 11 years and the maximum at 34. We did not have the Cultural Navigator or any other similar learning portal. Our organizational culture was such that everyone willingly would work between 9 to 14 hours daily. There was no time to develop soft skills, and the major focus every day was putting out real fires to get work done. Sounds familiar? It took our team a long time to become a high-performing team. The first year was terrible, with 2 major challenges we faced as a group. The first was the changed power dynamics on the team, and the second was the diversity of our opinions. So here is how the power challenges surface through the lens of the COI. My team members in Mexico City, Toronto, Santiago, and Tokyo had a very strong hierarchical preference, and the others in London, Frankfurt, and Atlanta had a preference for equality. Our team member in Frankfurt was originally the leader of the group. She was responsible for the team for more than 5 years when she decided to step down for personal reasons, and I joined the team as the new leader. She had a very strong preference for control, and the rest of the team had a preference for constraint at varying degrees of strength. Without a tool such as the Cultural Navigator, we learned through trial and error, tough experiences, power struggle, conflict, and confrontations to finally find a way to work together. Over time, we learned to trust each other and were glued at the hip working together as a dream team. But it took almost 2 years before that happened. My point here is, look at all the time we wasted before we got to where we needed to be. Today, in hindsight, when I look back, I wish we had the resources of the tools such as the Cultural Navigator. As I was preparing for this webinar, I asked myself, how would I personally leverage the Cultural Navigator if I were in the same position today? Here is an option to consider. First and foremost, I would ask each team member to study the country profiles for the UK, Germany, Japan, Mexico, Chile, Canada, and the US to learn how individuals in these cultures prefer to work. Then I would have each member on my team take the COI. I would find a certified COA facilitator to moderate our first face-to-face meeting. This meeting would be all about understanding our individual work preferences and developing strategies to overcome the gaps identified in our team aggregate report. I would make sure we walk out of the meeting with clear strategies and guiding principles on how we plan to be effective as a working group. Then, I would work separately with my HR leader in Germany and invite her to mentor each member on my team. I would leverage the network options provided on the Cultural Navigator and create a global HR team. This would provide the team another venue to learn more about each other and on a platform that is outside our daily interactions, which were heavily focused on work-related issues. So let me end here by stating that we are continuously building bridges to overcome gaps and differences in our work, social, and personal lives. Growing literature in this field has clearly proven time and again that 90% of team failures are caused by support system problems, and 80% of the value of using teams comes from within teams as they find a way to bridge differences and work together. All that is required is a nudge in the right direction. Let me now turn it over to Andrew so he can share how you can leverage the Cultural Navigator to improve team performance. Andrew?
Thank you, Ila. So one of the areas where you can effectively leverage the Cultural Navigator to address some of the challenges that Ila had shared earlier would be our country guides section, which is located on the top menu here. You can, of course, set your favorite countries as you begin to set up your Cultural Navigator account, or access our database on over 100 locations by either typing in a country location here or clicking on the View Country link. But once you visit a country guide homepage, such as Japan seen here, you can gain access to all of the research that we have on that particular location within the Cultural Navigator. So as Ila had mentioned during her case study, within her team, she had members from a variety of different locations around the world in which she would have had encouraged her fellow members to review and research the information available online to become to a fuller understanding of how culture may impact their business relationships. So one of the areas you can take advantage of as you explore each country guide is the cultural norms that are valued and reinforced within the location. Seen here, you can get an overview of the cultural norms that tend to be valued and reinforced within Japan, and then click on the View Report link on the top to access the full report and debrief text that is available across the 3 dimensions of culture that we had reviewed earlier. So we can quickly review here, for example, the hierarchy preference or norm noted for Japan, as Ila had mentioned. So we can get a better understanding of how this may manifest itself within the country's culture, and then also see some examples when this particular norm may illustrate itself within a work environment, or even when there may be variances when working within different regions or different ethnic groups within the country. But returning to the country guide homepage, one of the other areas that are of a valuable insight for you as you go and explore each country's culture is the cultural gap alert, which you see on the right-hand side here. So this automatically compares my personal preferences against the norms that tend to be valued and reinforced within Japan. So as a team member looking to improve my work relationships with my colleagues and counterparts across a variety of locations, I can utilize this tool to have a better understanding of how culture may impact me within the work environment, and then receive full debrief analysis as I go into the full report. Of course, we also offer details on management information, such as meetings or introductory greetings and communication patterns within the country. And I can quickly access a database of our articles here, and then even build my own personal report to review later. But now that we have an understanding of how the Cultural Navigator can support you in understanding national culture and how it can be represented at that level within our diverse teams, let's move on to a more focused example, that of our Cultural Navigator network, which you see here. Of course, we've already reviewed how you can complete your own COI assessment, so I won't go through that process again, as that would be the first step of being able to compare your personal results to others and develop other awareness. But let's take a look at some of the features that are unlocked to you after you receive your own personal report. So Ila had noted that she would have encouraged her team members to review an aggregate report of all of their preferences that are combined within the team. Well, you can do that within the Cultural Navigator through the network section, accessed through this top menu here, and within the teams area. You are able to create a team or join an existing team on the Cultural Navigator and have access to a variety of different comparison and collaborative features online. You can run a gap analysis to define where you may have particular cultural gaps with your fellow team members, or, as Ila had noted earlier, run an aggregate report that will help to show the pattern of cultural preferences within your team and show where you may have particular issues in communication or planning tasks. So here, within the being and doing continua, we can receive a bit of a debrief analysis about the pattern that is represented here, where we can see almost equal representation of both orientations. So you can have a better understanding of how your personal cultural preferences may impact you within your team, review each of the scales within the aggregate report, and build upon your own understanding of how culture can impact you personally when interacting with your fellow team members. So you can take advantage, particularly of these tools available within the network section to connect with your counterparts, connect with your colleagues, and access comparison tools for either a team or even a one-on-one comparison to build out your understanding of how you can work more effectively across cultures. So with these tools and resources, you'll be able to have a better approach to the challenges that you experience as a diverse team, So I'll now pass it back over to Lynn, who will close out our discussion today before we open up to the questions that you have all sent us. Lynn?
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Ila. So back to a quick polling question to ask what was the most exciting part of the Cultural Navigator, of this newest version of the Cultural Navigator? Is it the overall updated look, the ease of navigation, perhaps the customizable user interface, the updated cultural orientations indicator, or the collaborative learning tools? Go ahead and select what you think is the most exciting aspect of the new version of the Cultural Navigator. So let's close it up, Lakeisha, and see what people are saying. The updated cultural orientations indicator is championed today. Fantastic, and the collaborative learning tools are also high on the list. Thank you so much. And let's take a look at the opposite side. What do you think is going to be one of the biggest challenges you'll face in launching the tool within your organization? Would it maybe be marketing materials to support the launch? Perhaps getting the message out to your organization? Driving usage of the Cultural Navigator? Or perhaps answering questions about the learning platform. If you choose other, go ahead and type it into the chat box. Let's go ahead and close that poll, Lakeisha, and see where our challenges may be for our participants. Driving usage of the Cultural Navigator. It seems to be a common theme across all of our webinars. And we are here to support you. Our business development executives that support your organization are your front line to helping you drive usage of the Cultural Navigator. So thank you so much for that insight. We appreciate it. I'd like to summarize the power of the Cultural Navigator with a visual. If I could refer to the 4 key pillars upon which we built the Cultural Navigator. The first is that it's personal. We personalized it to each user, so each user can maximize their time on the Cultural Navigator, as Andrew pointed out, with the interest buttons and our learning paths and the COI being straight in the initial page that you come to when you log into your account on the Cultural Navigator. And the second pillar is collaborative learning. It's built into the tool across all aspects of the tool, so users can follow and connect with a broader network to deepen their learning. The third pillar is that it's relevant. It's relevant to each client at the organizational level with unique features and customization options that are available at the enterprise level. And finally, the Cultural Navigator is representative of all of our product offerings and provides an excellent platform for both pre- and post-session extended learning. So I will invite you to join us for another webinar in this series being held monthly from now until February 2013 and beyond, depending on need from our clients. We'll share this listing of upcoming webinars with you via email along with the recorded webinar. I want to thank you for your time today. We hope this webinar has been a value add to you in understanding how the Cultural Navigator can help manage diverse teams in your organization. We now end the recorded portion of today's program and move into the question and answer portion of the webinar. Thank you so much for your participation.